I'm here to talk to you about resilience and the power of connection to heal trauma. This is a very personal subject for me. This is something that I believe in tremendously, and I'm going to start by telling you two stories. And these two stories are about John and Ann. John and Ann are my parents. That's them in 1974 when they got married. John and Ann are from poor working class families. None of their parents had gone to college. They met in high school, they got married, they had 2 kids, they moved to the Linden neighborhood of Columbus. As we lived there, as we grew up, the neighborhood got violent, had some issues, and my parents wanted something different for us. So my dad, who was a roofer, decided to go back to college at night. My mom also went back to school. They graduated college, they got good jobs, they moved us to an affluent suburb with the best schools. My brother and I graduated from high school, and we both went on to graduate from Ohio State. My brother's an engineer, and I'm an educator. And now my son, actually, in less than a month, will graduate from Ohio State University. This is a story we're incredibly proud of. It's a story we tell, and it's how their hard work paid off and affected generations. But I'm going to go back, and I'm going to retell that story. And I'm going to talk about the parts that we don't normally talk about in my family. This is John and Ann. They come from poor working class families, and they also come from families of trauma, of abuse and addiction. And because dysfunction loves dysfunction, they found each other, they fell in love, and they got married. But they didn't really like being married. But they didn't know what to do about it, so they thought, well, let's try to have a kid. So my mom was about 6 months pregnant with me when they decided that it didn't really work, they didn't like being married, and they went to lawyers to get a divorce. The lawyers, their 2 brothers, separated my mom and dad into different rooms, talked to them, prayed for them, brought them together, prayed for them again, and sent them on their way, and my parents chose to not get divorced. So they're going to put themselves out of business. Bad divorce lawyers. But they went on. They, again, bought the house in Linden, had my brother. My dad's a roofer. He didn't have a lot of money. So to go to college, my uncle, who had made money in farming, gave my parents money to go to college. The neighborhood rallied around my family, babysat my brother and I, so that my mom could graduate. And again, we went to the affluent neighborhood. Here it is. This is our moment of success, except right around this time, my mom's brother, who was an active addict, committed suicide. This was a very difficult time in our family, and my mom's trauma response went to control and perfectionism, which I rebelled against heartily. So my sophomore year of high school, I started failing. I graduated by the skin of my teeth and by the grace of some very kind teachers. My brother, on the other hand, was a National Merit Scholar, National Honor Society, lettered in 3 sports, and starred in the school musical. What we didn't know at the time is that he was starting to use drugs more and more. He got a full ride to Case Western Reserve University, but by that first year at college, his mental health issues and addiction were out of control, and he was not able to continue college. I found myself unmarried and pregnant at 20. My parents and now in-laws rallied around my husband and I and said, "You will go to college," and we did. My brother went to rehab several times, and at 24, it stuck. He found an incredible recovery community, a church community, and my parents put him through college, and here we are. The beginning and the end of these stories are very much the same. But what happens in the middle is very different, and one story we tell and one we don't. Why is that? Because trauma is messy. Trauma most likely involves the people we love the most and the people who love us the most. Trauma is messy. It doesn't sit in one place. It's not just my grandma's alcoholism or my uncle's suicide. It ricochets through families and through generations in unpredictable ways. But here's the great news, guys, and here's the great news of their story. Healing is possible, and it's possible through connection. Through the lawyers that took a moment with my family, to the neighborhood friends, to our family, our friends, our church community, healing is possible. So my experience with my family led me to education, and I had this vision of becoming the teacher that walked into a classroom, looked at the kids that were struggling, and said, "I believe in you." And they'd say, "Oh my gosh, no one's ever said that." And they'd change their whole lives. And then Michelle Pfeiffer was going to play me in a movie. So I had this vision, but we all know that's not how it works. Trauma is messy. And a kid who's at risk and experienced trauma is just as likely on any given day to tell you off as they are to thank you. So I knew I was ill-equipped, but here's the great part. I was in a district and a community who believes in supporting these kids and these families. And I'm lucky to be a part of that. And the language around trauma-informed education started to be was spoken more and more. I started to hear this. Now, 5 years ago, the district made a decision to open a high school for our most at-risk students, and I knew I had to be a part of it. So I was a part of the founding team that created that school. And as we began to plan and design the school, we decided to design it around trauma-informed education. So what does that mean? Well, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, I'm gonna go into trauma, but I'm gonna explain how we used it for education. So I'm going to start with the ACEs study. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. These are things like abuse, neglect, death of a family member, mental illness in the household, homelessness, on and on. The ACEs study found that if a child experienced 3 or more of these in their childhood, they were more at risk for negative outcomes. Well, what does that mean? In adolescence, it actually looks like ADHD. It's an inability to understand danger. It is impulse control. It is bad attendance in school. We see mental health issues go up, depression, anxiety. And in adulthood, what's crazy is we even see high risk for things like broken bones, high blood pressure, diabetes, addiction, smoking, alcoholism, an inability to hold down a job. All of those things translate. So if you have the ACEs, you're more at risk for these things. But what does that mean? Why is that? So we have to talk about the brain. When we talk about the brain, I'm going to use Dan Smiegel's hand-brain model. Look it up online on YouTube. There's a lot of great resources. I love it. But we're going to talk about the brain. This is the cortex, so right up in here, right? This is where we process logic, language. When I look at the world and I have to make sense of it, I do it here. This is my limbic system. This is my amygdala, my hippocampus. These are my memories, my emotion. When I think about holding my sons for the first time, I'm using my limbic system. This is my brainstem right here, so right back in here. This is our automatic part of our brain. This is my heart rate, my digestion, my breathing. This is where fight, flight, or freeze resides. So when you experience trauma or an adverse experience, your brain, right here, this begins to say fight, flight, or freeze. We've got to survive. It messes with our emotions, and literally our cortex, that logic and our language, it goes offline. If you've ever been in a really intense argument, you know there's no amount of words that are going to bring you back. That's because your brain's offline. You're not thinking in words. So when you've experienced that repeatedly, it actually begins to damage the brain in very predictable ways. This, your cortex, it's actually damaged. It can't process logically what is happening to it in the same way. It doesn't make meaning of the experiences in the same way that a healthy brain would. We begin to live in our trauma. Our amygdala, our hippocampus, it starts to, it breaks up the circadian rhythms. You're not sleeping as well. Your capacity to hold memory, to process time, it starts to go away. It starts to be deteriorated. And our brainstem, we see those physical reactions. Our digestion is off, heart rate, our breathing. We see these we looked at high blood pressure that comes directly because this is damaged. At Tri Academy, the school we created here, we always said every year we had at least one student that had trauma vomit, that sometimes they just needed to throw up, they weren't sick, and then we'd go on with the day. That's a direct result of that, of long-term and repeated trauma. So, what happens? What does that look like in school? Well, when I have a student in front of my desk and they are cursing at me, they are offline, they're dysregulated, my first job is to bring the brain back online. How do you do that? You do that through breathing and the 5 senses. If you sit at my desk, I have candy you can taste, I have oils to smell, I have fidgets to touch. I will engage your senses, I'll help you breathe, I'll bring you online. But that's not what I want to do only. I want to heal, right? I don't want that kid back in front of my desk every week. I want that kid to learn how to regulate themselves, how to heal their brain. Guys, this is the great news. This is so cool. Resilience factors can heal the brain. And this right here is the DNA of Tri Academy. It's built into everything we do, and it's how I handle kids here at MHS. This is the root of my educational philosophy. So, number one, and this is the number one research-based way to help heal a child, is to create positive connection with a safe, stable, reliable adult. Tri Academy, every staff member knew their number one job was to build a relationship and help regulate a kid before we educate. When a kid sits at my desk, they know that I'm going to see who they are way above what they did. Next, belonging or affiliation. If you have something that knocks you down and you need resilience to pick yourself back up, it's really nice to know where you belong, where you fit in. I'm an educator. I'm proud to be a monarch. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a Buckeye, I'm a Crew fan. I know where I fit and where I belong, but for many of our kids, they don't. School, in fact, has been a re-traumatizing force in their lives because they didn't fit. They didn't get the grades. So we had to create at Tri a place that they belonged. It was our Tri family. And they knew no matter what they brought, that they were accepted and they were a part of our family. We created our own student council. We created all sorts of ways that kids could own the space and feel like they belong. External supports, I love this one. This is great because it's not just about being able to access them, it's about being one. How much more able are we to recover from something that sets us back than when we know that we can help others, right? So at Tri Academy, we constantly built service opportunities. Our kids fixed meals for others. They fed the police force once a year. They decorated the Hope Center for Christmas. It was baked into what we did. Next, we have self-esteem. This is such a difficult one at times because these kids have been taught to see the negative. So what does self-esteem look like? It looks like celebration. Every quarter, every kid walked up and rang that bell, and we all cheered for every credit they earned. What does it look like? It looks like small celebration. The kid who couldn't get through a single math class all week because of their anxiety, when they sat through that math class and they engaged for one day, I'm going to celebrate. As they say in recovery, it's progress, not perfection. I am going to show them their own strengths and abilities until they can see it for themselves. And last, voice, choice, and control. The root of trauma is often a lack of control. So how do we give kids who don't have an accurate perception of danger a good ability to express voice, choice, and control? Well, we let them see how their choices in the school affect how we process and how we run the building. At Tri, every week we started with Tri-Town Hall, where I showed them the week so they could predict, they would feel a sense of control. But I'd also let them give feedback on what they wanted changed, what they liked, what they didn't like, and then I allowed them to see how their voice impacted my decision-making. We created the safe place at Tri Academy, which I'm so proud of, using these resilience factors, research-based ways to heal that brain. Now, guys, the truth is, though, this is great, but trauma is messy. And in 12 years, I have lost students to overdoses, to car wrecks, to gun violence. I have invested hours of my life and love into kids who went to jail. Trauma is messy, but healing is possible. Other kids went on to have amazing careers, go to college, become the parents they dreamed of having themselves. And the truth is, when that kid is in front of me telling me off or making horrible choices, I don't know what outcome I'm looking at. But what I do know is that these things are the best shot they have. It's the best thing I have to give them. Now, here's the truth. Life is not fair, but it's been abundantly unfair in my favor. When I think of the kid that I was, skipping class with all the attitude, to my teachers not finishing assignments, and then I look at my life now, and I walk through the halls of Marysville High School, and I have more love and laughter in a day than I could ever possibly have deserved. I can't help but do this work. I have to. And I'm not asking you guys to do that. This is not my call to action. We don't want to give up our careers and go become teachers, all of us. Here's what I am asking. I'm asking you to take a moment to see who is in front of you, to take the moment to make that connection. Those lawyers took that moment with my parents, 1 hour. They didn't know the outcomes. They don't know that they affected generations. They don't know how they affected their lives. But they took that moment, they made that connection. Each one of you is uniquely placed to connect with people in your lives. And I'm asking you to see who's in front of you, to make the connection, because I truly believe it's the best chance we have at healing. Thank you.